going over the divisional round recap, going over Josh Allen versus Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Commanders win. We'll also go over the head coaches, Ben Johnson to the Bears, Kevin O'Connell gets extended by the Vikings, Josh McDaniels, the OC for the Patriots. We'll go over the college football national title as well and end with the famous worst top five. But divisional round of football. 8 teams started this weekend, and now 4 remain for the quest for the Super Bowl. We're here to break it all down in this divisional round
Yeah.
matchup.
Yeah, it started in Kansas City, Missouri, with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Houston Texans. Houston looking like they fell off a cliff this regular season. People kind of wondering what happened. And then suddenly their offensive line found a rhythm versus the Chargers, albeit versus the Chargers. Still one of the better defenses in the NFL, though. And then, Nico Collins and CJ Stroud started getting on the same page, doing what they do. Playoff Joe Mixon showed up and started showing out. And then, we got some inspired football from the Texans. I was like, I don't really know what to expect from the Houston Texans, but I feel like their ceiling, like the most points they can score, is going to be 17 points coming into this game. And this game kind of played out exactly how we thought it would play out. I'm like, the Chiefs, maybe they do come out and score a lot of points, but they kind of did exactly what they've done all year, which is they played a close enough good game in the first half, and then they went ahead and absolutely dominated the fourth quarter. And people want to talk about the roughing the passer call, obviously so, and we can talk about that because Troy Aikman was spot on with it, and he was visibly annoyed with it, but that's still not an excuse to get absolutely dominated in the fourth quarter. You still had plenty of opportunities to score, and maybe it did help Kansas City score, but at the end of the day, you're going up against the Chiefs. You know what you're up against, and you have to go out there and beat them. And you just didn't. But this game kind of encouraged me about Houston in the future because Houston did play well in this game. I thought in the first half they looked really good, but in the fourth quarter, CJ Stroud, you could kind of see like the panic set in a little bit for Houston. So it's like, okay, they kind of showed up and did exactly what they needed to do to not get crushed by the media, though. And then people make excuses for them because of those two, like, blatantly obvious miss pass interference calls when we saw Jalen Hurts get murdered. Jared Goff got knocked out of the game and it wasn't a flag. Head to head, not a flag. And then Josh Allen, got hit a couple times. Lamar got crushed, but like the only time it was called was versus Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. The Texans in this game, what they showed me was I'm excited for their future. I think that when Stephon Diggs comes back, it's going to be a lot more interesting. And if they can just get that offensive line right, I feel like they have the team that's capable to make an AFC title game next year, or even, maybe make a Super Bowl push depending how next week goes. But the Texans, their offensive line is clearly an issue. CJ Stroud was abused in this game, 8 sacks in this game, which killed a lot of their drives. And then I think Joe Mixon played a good game overall. Give credit to him. Nico Collins got it done, but ultimately made a couple of mistakes. Your kicker didn't deliver when you needed to, and that's ultimately, I think, part of the reason why you didn't win. At one point, it felt like the momentum was shifting somewhat in the Texans' direction, and then the Chiefs, when they needed to, they went out, they snatched it, and they took it away from you, frankly. And this is why the Chiefs are what they are. No matter how bad the Chiefs' offense can look at times this year, they still find a way to win, especially in these close games where the Texans haven't proven that at this point. CJ Stroud struggled in his second year, and I think now going into year three, especially if he's going to get paid like the big boys, he's shown that he can win playoff games, and he shows that he can play well against a bad defense, that he elevates his performance in the playoffs. And I don't think he necessarily played a bad game in this game. However, he didn't prove to me that he's one of the big four, like the Josh Allen, uh, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Patty Mahomes. He showed me that he's capable of being number five, but he's not number five right now. I think there's other players that definitely deserve his throne. Um, but come back with an offensive line and Stephon Diggs and maybe another weapon, and Texans are definitely capable of being contenders in the next year or so.
Yeah, and I think they're capable of being contenders. I feel like with them, like offensive line is definitely important. Although I felt like their offensive line played better in the playoffs than they did in the regular season. And then Joe Mixon is good, but for this team, like you have the defense there, and that's about as good as a defensive job you can do against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they gave you a chance. And if you play that well versus Kansas City and you're just not putting up the points along with it, that's going to end up discouraging you when it comes into the fourth quarter. And getting beat by Patrick Mahomes in the fourth quarter is just what he does to great defenses. I mean, the Patriots absolutely destroyed the Chiefs in the first half when the Chiefs almost came back, the D Ford game. They ended up losing, but like Patty Mahomes came back versus them, down 10 twice in the Super Bowl versus San Francisco against two really good defenses there. So it's kind of like just what he does. I feel like on offense, though, I'm hesitant to say that Stephon Diggs is going to be there like consistently for you because he's an older wide receiver who's had injury issues the past few years. Really wasn't the same player the last couple years in Buffalo, where it's like, okay, maybe he's starting to decline out of the top 10. Then this year he gets injured. Like, I don't necessarily see Stephon Diggs being a massive, massive difference maker that puts you over the top and into a Super Bowl. I feel like you have to go out there and draft a receiver, especially with how much money that you paid him. And then also, now we still have to think about a replacement for Joe Mixon because he's also someone who's a little bit older here, which I definitely think is someone who will be easier to replace in the draft.
Yeah, for sure. I think about the Texans, even if they don't get rid of Joe Mixon next year, if they can get someone like Cam Scatabo on this team would be elite. I think they would complement each other really well. I am curious to see where Scatabo ends up, but I think that the Texans would be a great fit just because he complements Joe Mixon's game well. If we're going to go for like a Sonic and Knuckles type influence here. Um, but I do think that, yeah, I think you're right about Stephon Diggs. I think that we're going to see him closer to what we saw with DeAndre Hopkins in Tennessee, where I don't think he's going to look as bad. Like Tennessee, the quarterback play was awful, obviously, but he was still a very capable receiver. You're not going to see the vintage Texans, DeAndre Hopkins, or better yet, even the Bills, in this case, Stephon Diggs, but you're going to at least see a consistent, reliable receiver, but he's not going to get fed the way that Nico Collins does or whoever they end up drafting. Because I do think they're going to draft a receiver to complement those three together well. Or maybe they go out and sign somebody. We don't know. Depends on what their cap space looks like. I believe they have some of the more higher cap spaces in the league. I believe that they were interested in T. Higgins potentially, which would be interesting. But Texans are definitely trending upward, and the Chiefs, they're just Patrick Mahomes is just ridiculous in the divisional round. 8-0 in the divisional round, has not thrown an interception in the second round of the playoffs. The divisional round, I don't think I've ever seen somebody as dominant as Patrick Mahomes in the divisional round in NFL history at this point. He now has more playoff wins than anybody outside of Tom Brady as far as that conversation goes.
Yeah, no, it's crazy because that touchdown that he threw while he was getting sacked, everyone's like, "Oh my god!" It's like we haven't seen as many plays out of him this year like that, but I feel like he's kind of just been chilling. People like want to hold like the Chiefs going to so many conference championships in a row against them. It's like, well, have you been going to the conference championship like how many years? 7 years now in a row,
Yeah,
6, 7,
second, seventh
um,
consecutive.
seventh consecutive year in a row. Like you're supposed to still be going out there and being a world beater week in and week out. Like we've seen the Patriots fall off, and this was a team that had the best record in the NFL this year. And people are like, "Oh no, it's just like the Chiefs have taken a step back this year." It's like, well, defensively, this is one of the best defensive teams that they've had. Maybe they have a small issue in their secondary, but up front with George Karlaftis, Chris Jones still being a really dominant player, like this is still one of the best defenses they've had. And then with Kareem Hunt now and Pacheco, who hasn't really been himself, but like you still have Hollywood Brown, you still have Travis Kelsey there, and you still have DeAndre Hopkins now. This is like one of the better Chiefs teams I feel like we've had over the past 3 years. And people want to like, oh, I can't believe the NFL wants them to 3P. It's like, no, I just think they're better than everyone. And not everyone shows up in clutch situations the same way Patty Mahomes does, but like every single divisional round, he goes out there and does it. Like this isn't by an accident. They're just the better team. They have the best defensive coordinator and head coach combo in the league, and now they also have the best quarterback and coach combo. Like, and they've had it. It's like ridiculous now when you see takes like, "Oh, the Bills are the new Chiefs." They're like, no, the Chiefs are still here, and the Bills still have to go out there and beat the Chiefs. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, agreed. The Chiefs have just found a way. I mean, I look at Kareem Hunt, a guy that Obviously, they had cut beginning of their dynasty, right? Goes to Cleveland. He's not really picked up anywhere else around the league. They pick him up. He comes in, immediately fills in greatly. I think about um, Carson Steele, him coming in, just a seventh round guy that they get acclimated. He plugs in, he plays well. You see other receivers like Juju, for example, who doesn't succeed when he leaves Kansas City, but when he comes in, makes plays when it matters. DeAndre Hopkins, same idea. Like the way that they're able to plug people in, it's very similar to the early Patriots when you see people like Wes Welker play very well, who was great in Miami. Don't get me wrong, but you plug in all these random guys that come in and they immediately succeed. I think it speaks more to the organization. It speaks more to their team specifically. Like the Chiefs, if any team is going to make the Patriots dynasty look lesser, it's going to be the Chiefs. And Patrick Mahomes is only 29 years old. He wins this Super Bowl. He has four already. We're talking about something really special. We could be seeing the Michael Jordan of this sport. If we haven't seen it with Brady, Patrick Mahomes is a level of great that, unlike you know, Brady was a six-round pick. Obviously, we know the story. Michael Jordan's classic story was cut from his high school basketball team. He might be in some ways the LeBron, where he's just the chosen one. He was a first-round pick, gets selected. They trade up to number 10 to get him, and then he becomes this all great figure around Kansas City. Becomes this all-time great quarterback. He wasn't a first overall pick, but he was still a high-round pick. I feel like if you're comparing the Michael Jordan LeBron debate, this is another Jordan LeBron debate. And Mahomes immediately at the gate was better at this point.
Yeah, I feel like that's unfair because LeBron will never be at the same level, at least in his sport, than Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. Where there's an argument that LeBron isn't even number two. But with Michael Jordan, it's more of like a Bill Russell versus Michael Jordan argument, or two Michael Jordans, because like LeBron's played how much longer than Michael Jordan and still doesn't have as many rings as him, and it took him how much longer to get that many 30-point games than Michael Jordan, where
I
it's
feel
if Mahomes wins um nine, eight, nine rings, then he has the case over Brady because he'll have the stats. He'll be eye test. He'll look better than Tom Brady did, and he'll have more rings than him, and then that'll kind of get rid of the head-to-head narrative. But it's gonna be what's more impressive: Mahomes, who's more athletic, can make more throws than him outside the pocket, or Brady, who wasn't as skilled as Patrick Mahomes, but somehow was able to win seven Super Bowls, even though he's not as athletic. So I feel like it's more of like a older generation. But with LeBron, he's just had too many meltdowns. We'll never have the rings there in an easier sport to win championships.
what I'm saying about with LeBron is not that he's better than Michael Jordan. I'm saying the debate of Michael Jordan versus LeBron and how it's dissected at your local sports bar. A lot of people will argue Michael Jordan was more dominant, but LeBron James is a better overall player, better rebounder, a better three-point shooter. Not quite free throw shooter, but all around player, LeBron James might be better at more things than Michael Jordan, and people are going to argue that same thing for Mahomes. He's more mobile. Um, Maybe he's better at throwing on the run. Definitely more athletic than him. So that
Yeah.
argument that LeBron has against Michael Jordan, I think Patrick Mahomes is going to have also, where he has the intangibles, the eye test. As far as like highlight reels, Michael Jordan probably takes LeBron in that cake. But same idea. As far as like highlight reels, Sports Center top 10 plays, like Patrick Mahomes is going to have probably double what Brady had at his time, just for what he's able to do. That we see, like a Steph Curry, another example of people who just blow the minds of people playing the sport, people not playing the sport, people just seeing it, whether it be on the reels, whether it be on TikTok, whatever it be, just mind blowing plays, and that's what Mahomes has. And I can't say he's the goat, but I do think that the argument's going to be a lot more legitimate if he gets that fourth ring and wins three straight.
Yeah, I feel like the argument is going to be legitimate once he has seven and ties him, because we do have those head to head matchups where LeBron and Jordan, we never saw them head to head. And then Mahomes has time to win eight if he wins four before 30, where a lot of quarterbacks don't really start winning Super Bowls until they get into their 30s, and maybe they win two or three, where Elway didn't win until the last 2 years of his career here. So it'd be like if LeBron like had as many rings as Michael Jordan. So like that's gonna be the toughest part with the Mahomes debate is he's gonna have an opportunity to have just as many rings as Tom Brady, and I think he'll actually surpass him, which would end up giving him the edge in the argument. But the people who will still side with Brady are gonna be like, well, what happened when they played head to head here? But at the same time, people are going to look at Brady's old Super Bowls like, well, look at the early 2000s. Like, he didn't throw for a ton of yards in those playoff matchups. He got to a Super Bowl where he only threw one touchdown throughout the entire AFC playoff run.
Yeah. I also think that the current situation for Mahomes, just like what we saw with Brady, when Brady entered the Patriots, it was a lot more defensive focused. The first three Patriots teams, if you look at their defense with the Mike Vrabels of the world, the Richard Seymours, the Ty Laws, you get the idea. That defense was constructed not quite to the same level of Legion of Boom, but it deserves the same, deserves the respect of all time great defenses. And maybe it doesn't because of it, but those first three Super Bowls were very much defensive focused. Look at his numbers; they're not overly impressive. I know it's a different time, but then they have this 10-year gap where they don't win any Super Bowls. Brady has his 10 years. He has his 2007 year where he doesn't make it. And then 2011 when he faces the Giants again. He has this 10-year gap with no Super Bowls. If Mahomes, let's say he loses next week against Josh Allen, and then Reed retires, Kelsey retires, and this era, this current generation of the Chiefs comes to an end the next year or two, and he doesn't win a Super Bowl for the next 10 years, that's also gonna that's also gonna be an interesting thing to think about. No
Yeah,
guarantees he wins more.
yeah, because the thing if Andy Reid retired, Travis Kelsey retires, the thing with that would be like, okay, well, if you look at Mahomes and Brady, if Brady didn't beat Mahomes when they faced each other in the playoffs, Mahomes could very well have 5 rings, and so would Brady.
Yeah, very true.
So that'll be the tough one. It'll all depend on if he wins it this year, but I think he does have a good chance to at least win 6, like
Oh yeah,
realistically. And I know it's tough to do, but I think the thing Kansas City realized with Patrick Mahomes is like how important is Tyreek Hill really if our defense is getting destroyed and maybe we have an interception or a fumble on offense? It's like they're like, we're just gonna build a top five, have a top five defense every single year, and just have some guys who can show up and make clutch plays because we know Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to do that at the end of the day when it comes to it. And the Chiefs built this dynasty the exact right way, but is it tough to like not want to run it back where if you win 4 rings in a row, who is touching that in the future? Exactly. That's
never.
going to be the most impossible feat to do where no one's ever done 3. Then you come back and do 4 in a row and then you have 5 rings and then you're like, okay, I'm 30 with 5 rings. All I have to do is win. All I have to do is win like 3 out of the next 12 years. Okay.
And you're in.
Game on.
Yeah,
And then Patrick Mahomes could also leave and go somewhere else because Brady left and went somewhere else. Like Montana's left and gone somewhere else. So like are we gonna see Patrick Mahomes like go the Texans at some point because he's from Texas? Are we gonna see him go to the Cowboys after Jerry Jones dies? Like
that'd be something that I do think is possible. The cool thing about the Chiefs, so of all the teams that have repeated and are contending for the three-peat, no team has made it. Only two teams have made it to the AFC or NFC title game. So if they win this game, none of them have made it to the Super Bowl for the third consecutive year. And not only that, if we
hmm,
also apply the fact that they made the Super Bowl 2 years prior, so they really have made four out of the last five. The only person between them is Joe Burrow. Then we're talking about a situation where a couple plays go the other way, and they've made five consecutive Super Bowls, which is just absurd. That whoever wins the Super Bowl has to go through the Chiefs. As of right now, 7 consecutive years, the AFC has gone through Arrowhead, except for that 1 year with Buffalo, but they still were there and won, respectively. If the Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl this year alone, even if they don't win it, they still had the best chance at a three-peat of any team in NFL history. So if Jaden Daniels or or Jalen Hurts slash Saquon Barkley gets in their way, I feel like no matter what, them going as far as they have already, three straight and contending for it, winning this next game, then they've already, in my mind, just proven the level of dominance even more.
yeah, I think just like the fact that they were the best team in the league this year and kind of felt like that they were coasting throughout the year. Like I still feel like this team has another gear that they can go to.
I think they're waiting for Buffalo to do that. I think we're going to see it against Buffalo, and then whether it's the Eagles or the Commanders, we'll see. But I think we're going to see the most of the Chiefs in this Buffalo game because they probably feel like that's their Super Bowl in some way. Then when they
Yeah,
make the
and I
Super Bowl, who knows?
Yeah, I haven't seen like enough from any other team in the playoffs to like genuinely convince me that I would want to pick them versus Kansas City. Because Kansas City's just Mahomes is one of those people you can't pick against, and no one's gonna fault you for picking him, especially with how the refs kind of favor him. But like at the end of the day, it's like no, like everyone else has almost blown the game. Like in every single other game, or had a lot of help from the other team, which the Chiefs went out there. And the craziest stat that I also want to talk about from this weekend is that every single team that won this weekend was outgained by their opponent.
Yeah, that's absurd. Which reminds me of that the Lions and Commanders game. If we have nothing else about the Chiefs and Texans game, that's another good game to pivot to.
For sure.
That game, yeah, I mean, this game, it's one of those games that in hindsight made the most sense for the Lions, where it felt like it was their year, but at the same time, with losing Hutchinson and only McNeil and Rodrigo, Alex Anzalone, Carlton Davis, the list goes on. Like their defense was just obliterated. By the end of it, they had the worst defense in the league. This game,
16 on IR.
16 players on IR. You think about 11 men on the field at any time. That's just devastating. And then they go into this game where pretty much the way they've won the last 2 months essentially has been their offense plays perfect and their defense gets a stop, and that's how they succeed. In this game, their offense doesn't play great. Jared Goff does not play a great game. They still put up 31 points respectively, but Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, with how efficient their offense has been all year, with how excellent they've been all year, Cliff Kingsbury getting a ton of credit, Dan Quinn getting a ton of credit as well. Jaden Daniels potentially being a top five quarterback in the league at this point with how great he's been all year. Like, this was the worst team they could have faced, I feel like. If they faced Tampa, they probably had a better chance. Vikings, better chance, but this team just knew how to expose their weaknesses, and down go the Lions, unfortunately, in devastating fashion.
Yeah, no, this was a devastating game because this wasn't a game that the Lions like that the Commanders won. I feel like this is a game that the Lions straight up lost. And it's like, hey man, you're a team that has your entire defense hurt. You're holding it together with tape, and then the first play of the game, Amik Robinson, like not the first play of the game, but you know what I mean, like breaks his arm in half, and he was your number one bright spot versus the Vikings, where he guarded Justin Jefferson. And then the first game, you're like, this is the guy who's going to carry us through the playoffs. He's going to guard Terry McLaurin. He's going to guard AJ Brown. Then we're going to go up against Kansas City. He can float around on D Hop and Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. No, he breaks his arm literally in half the first play of the game. And then if you're the Lions, you should be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't turn the ball over instead of having four interceptions and a fumble. Like this was a game where it's like you take away four turnovers, then this game the score is reversed. It's like 45-27 at this point, where it's like if you don't hand the Commanders the ball four separate times, even if you just cut your turnovers in half, you end up winning that game. This was a game where Jared Goff got knocked out, but Jamison Williams throwing that interception when you were within 10 points is absolutely inexcusable when someone besides Jared Goff is turning the ball over. Jared Goff has three picks. You have a fumble in this game, but Jamison Williams turning the ball over. And then the Lions were just way too amped in this game. They were way too hyper. And then it felt like it just slipped away. And then they just never got the game back. Like this game went by really fast. And it was like, it turned on, and then suddenly it was just over. And then the Commanders went out there, took advantage of every single play. But it's like if you're the Lions, you have to understand not turning the ball over is the most important thing you can do when you don't have a defense and you have all of these weapons. All you have to do is just go out there and do what you've done all season and score. But any given Sunday, the Lions end up turning the ball over, and now you're probably going to lose Ben Johnson. You're probably going to lose. Well, you did lose Ben Johnson. You might lose Aaron Glenn as well. It's like, is this a team where you feel like you have faith that they'll just be able to plug and play with offensive and defensive coordinators? Are you a little bit concerned that they were that injured this year? And do you feel like with a full healthy roster, they'll just be back and better than ever next year.
I do have my doubts because Ben Johnson has been excellent the last 3 years for them. Best coordinator in football. He's now going to your division rival. Your division next year, not just your division being very tough, but also your schedule is one of the most devastating in the league. And so I don't think the Lions are going to be bad. I still think they're going to be a playoff team, but you lose not one but two of your biggest minds in the locker room as far as head coaching wise, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. Like that's going to be a massive loss. Can they still maintain their identity? Are they still going to keep with that offense? Maybe, but losing an offensive coordinator, we see the pros and cons of that, right? We saw when Josh Allen's a good example of that. I know this is an example you point to a lot. Like he had Brian Dayball and he was playing excellent. He goes the coordinator that fits between him and Joe Brady. He's throwing a bunch of turnovers. He's playing sloppy. They get the right coordinator involved, and then it fixes all their problems. I do think the coordinator, especially for the quarterback, could be the most important part of an offense succeeding. And losing Ben Johnson's huge. Now, I think that Dan Campbell's smart, and I think he can hire the right guy, so I think they should be fine. But I do think next year they won't win their division, most likely. I think they're probably going to
Yeah.
be a wild card team.
And I think that may be good for this Lions team because you know, overachieved last year when everyone was doubting you. And then you had all the expectations this year, people still doubting you, but you kind of had those excuses built in where it's like, you did have 16 players on IR, and I feel like the season is an accomplishment. You still did overachieve by getting the number one seed in the NFC, and I feel like there's a lot to be proud of there. I mean, your entire defense got hurt, but at the end of the day, you still left it you still left some of it up to us to wonder on the field there. It's like, well, you turned the ball over 5 times in this game, which shouldn't have happened. Like, this is a game that you should have won. And I feel like this is a similar team to the what the Boston Celtics have kind of been with Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, where they've kind of had expectations. They've kind of got there early, surpassed what they're supposed to do, but then they've had some failures and some meltdowns here. And it seemed like once no one had any expectations on them at all, once they weren't supposed to get to the finals and win it, and everyone was picking the Dallas Mavericks, picking Luca and Kyrie to beat them, and they only gave the Celtics a shot if Porzingis was there. Kind of feels like this Lions team where they kind of aren't anyone's favorite team. They're not always the best team in the league, but I feel like when all of the expectations are off of them and they're underdog, they feed on that more than being like the number one team in the conference. And they're just a better underdog. Where I feel like similarly with Boston, like Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum are at their best when they're the underdog. They're not necessarily the best as the number one contender when everyone is going for them.
I can agree with that. I mean, this year they had their opportunities to show that they were the most dominant team and they showed out. But I do agree. Like this year, this whole game against the Commanders reminded me of the second half against the Niners in the NFC title game, where maybe they're excited. They're about to make it to their second consecutive NFC title game. They're amped up. They're ready to go. They've had 2 weeks off. They know that they're trying to, play their hearts out, run through a brick wall, but they were almost too amped up. And that's what these turnovers caused. I feel like the same thing happened when they were 2 quarters away from making the Super Bowl with the 28-7 lead. They got too amped up, and that's what hurt them. Now, what gives me hope for the Lions is that they have a great GM in Brad Holmes, and they have a great head coach in Dan Campbell. They've been able to find talent even in the later rounds, and if they can continue their drafting the way they have, then I have no doubt they'll be fine. I do also think that this is a team that might be more aggressive this offseason, and I don't mean just with signing people. I mean like with going after someone like a Max Crosby who might be available, or going out and getting that next defensive player, because I felt like what killed them also doesn't help that their two best edge rushers were down, but once when they couldn't generate any pressure, their secondary isn't excellent. And with injuries, it wasn't great at all. But even with the players that they had, their secondary wasn't like god tier. I think Terry and Arnold has a lot of improvements to do. But if they can go out and get another edge rusher like a Max Crosby, or maybe the Steelers rebuild, you get a TJ Watt, getting like a top 5 edge rusher in the league is going to be so paramount for the Lions and making that defense legitimate. They can make this defense legitimate, takes so much pressure off the offense for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it'll take a lot of pressure off the offense. And I feel like the offense sometimes puts too much pressure on themselves, but you have to understand a situation like that just to not turn the ball over. And I feel like the Lions will be back next year, but now we have to give them the same treatment we give the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, where until we see them do it, are you gonna do it? Are you gonna prove it? Because I've seen San Francisco do it, seen Philadelphia do it, and it wasn't Detroit's year because everyone on that team got hurt, and I feel like people were so quick to hate and make fun of this team where it's like I really don't get where like this hatred and vitriol came with the Lions where everyone's suddenly like clowning them where they're like, yeah, this is amazing that the Lions melt down. It's like this is weird. Where did this come from? Where if, like it was the Buffalo Bills who lost like that, they'd be like, oh, you just don't understand. Or if it's the same with the Texans, it's like, oh well, they played the Chiefs with the Ravens and the refs got involved. Every other team, there's been an excuse. The Chargers, oh, Herbert doesn't have an offensive line or any help at wide receiver with the Lions. Like everyone's just making fun of them where it's like, well, they have 16 players on injured reserve. Like, of course you're gonna not be that good on defense.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, I don't know. I don't know what the vitriol is. I don't know why you wouldn't root for the Lions at this point with how bad they've been historically, how excellent they've been, how wholesome this team is. Like, this should be America's team. At the same time, they were the one seed. They crumbled this past week, but I'm curious if this game is going to age better in hindsight because of what Jaden Daniels did in this game. Jaden Daniels played excellent. QBR in the 120s. He showed to be a playoff performer, rushed for another 50, played excellent, and he's having quietly the greatest rookie season arguably in history. He has the most rushing yards by a rookie, he has the most passing yards by a rookie. He's won 2 playoff games and he has a chance next week if he wins to be the first rookie to play and start in a Super Bowl automatically in his first year. And a lot of this to the Commanders, I applaud them. They went out, they signed a couple of guys that we weren't in love with, right? Austin Eckler, he was over the hill a little bit. They got the Bobby Wagners of the world, the Zach Ertz of the world, but they've been able to maximize every part of this team. Jaden Daniels is everything is advertised. He's been excellent for them. And at this point, like he makes the Super Bowl. Like, how does that change him in regards to like the NFL? Immediately going out there and making the Super Bowl in his first year with a Commanders team that was still somewhat in rebuild.
Yeah, I feel like it's similar to Joe Burrow, right? Where it's a Bengals team that maybe they don't have all the pieces on defense or the best offensive line, but with much, maybe as a little bit of a better all around offense, just without the receiver help. But I feel like it'd be similar to what Joe Burrow did his first year. He was fully healthy with the Cincinnati Bengals, where he went toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes and they end up making the Super Bowl. So I feel like that's definitely realistic for Jane Daniels, and he's one win away from breaking Ben Roethlisberger's rookie record. So that's really what he's competing for right now. And if he gets to a Super Bowl, it's the best season for any rookie ever. And then suddenly everyone wants to play for him. He's going to be the favorite to probably win MVP this year. And I don't get why he can't be in the MVP conversation this year because if Jane Daniels is not on the Washington Commanders, are they really having the same success that they're having this season where he goes in there and he's just one of those quarterbacks who changed an entire franchise's expectations now, where this isn't a team that was supposed to be in the playoffs. And now next year, this is going to be a team where if they don't win a playoff game, people are going to be like, what happened? And it's the same thing with the Bengals, where people are upset when the Bengals miss the playoffs now, when they're not in the conference championship, when the Bills don't get to the conference championship. It's like he now just set the expectations so high where now all of the pressure's on him, where it's like, okay, your first year in the NFL, you make it to a Super Bowl or even just the conference championship. Now you're going to be expected to go out there and potentially win your division next year if you get some more firepower and go out there and beat Philadelphia in a conference championship game. And now it's going to be game on versus you in Philadelphia. Now it's going to be okay. Is Nick Sirianni going to be good enough to get us over the hill in Washington? Like how that game goes is going to reconstruct that entire division. The Giants are going to be bad for a while. Still, I feel like I don't see the Giants just turning it around in year one with the new quarterback, and then the Cowboys are going to be the Cowboys. So it's like now with him, it's like you've set the expectations so high where you have to go out there and prove it in year two. And let's see if he can go out there and get it done. But people are going to be very disappointed if this team doesn't make the playoffs next year or doesn't win a playoff game, which I think they will. But now it's like that's the expectation. And you did that in 1 year with one of the worst franchises in the league. That's insane.
Yeah, honestly, again, we're not far removed from Dan Snyder being removed as owner, them selling it to their current owner now, and then them hiring or basketball players to run this organization. Let's not forget that Bob Myers is a part of this Commanders organization from the Warriors. Everyone was doubting them there. And then the Dan Quinn hire wasn't super popular either. Cliff Kingsbury was this abandoned offensive coordinator. And then Jaden Daniels was obviously as hyped up as he was. If Caleb Williams wasn't in this draft, he would have easily gone one. There were plenty of people in the Bears ears arguing for them to go for Jaden Daniels. But at this point, yeah, if he makes the Super Bowl, it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I feel like this NFC East is now constructing itself to become the new AFC North, right? We have one team that's always terrible, the Browns, the Giants. Perfect. Another team that was great in the 70s, but maybe wasn't excellent now, the Cowboys and Steelers, right? Past their glories. And then we have Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. Both teams have good front offices. Both teams have players great on both sides. So I think we're honestly seeing the AFC North in the NFC now with this team. And honestly, I do think I like the Commanders a little bit more than the Eagles at this point.
Yeah, we'll see. And we'll see how it plays out on Sunday. And that'll be the real determining factor because Philadelphia, over the past few years, has proven they can draft. Now that's going to be Washington because if Washington turns out they can't draft, well, that's going to be a huge problem for them. But we're going to need to see them be able to put together a better offensive line. You have good receivers right now, but you're also going to want a better running back solution next year. I feel like you maybe have another year with Eckler, and then you look elsewhere there. But you're going to have people who are going to want to play with Jaden Daniels. So it's going to be interesting to see how the front office manages this team heading into next year. But let's see how they stack up against Philadelphia because Philadelphia has put together one hell of a scary defense. And if Washington's defense gets to that level, Jaden Daniels has proven okay, come back, come back, come back, come back, come back in every single game until this game's like the past 6 games was a comeback on the last drive until he faced the Lions. And then every single turnover that the Lions gave the Commanders just turned that into points. And every single game this weekend has come down to who doesn't turn the ball over. If you don't turn the ball over, you're going to win playoff games. It's not about flashy offense, it's just about getting the ball in the end zone. That's what Washington did to perfection. So it'll be interesting to see just how this division shapes out. Especially now, we're going to have two powerhouse divisions where you have a situation where with the Bears, and we'll talk about them later. But now, how is that story going to be written next year? And are we going to get to see a Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels matchup in the playoffs next year?
I hope so. It's going to be exciting to see. I mean, we'll talk about Ben Johnson later in the show, but um, what that draft could become is going to be fascinating, especially because you have Drake May also in that draft as well. Both those guys going top three. Maybe redefining, the 2021 draft is what I think of when I think of top three picks going to quarterbacks and how that panned out. Hasn't panned out great for them. But this draft could honestly redefine that. Okay, these top three quarterbacks went and they all played pretty well. See how they pan out.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. But we went out for this game and I was sitting at a table with 6 other guys, and then I was wearing my Jameer Gibbs jersey. Some guy walks over to me, dressed up like he's going to Wall Street in New York. And he's like, "You from Detroit?" I'm like, "No, why are you?" And he's like, "This game is fucking bullshit, man. I've dealt with 30 years of this and now it's over and I'm ruined." He's like, "Did you bet any money on this game?" I was like, "No." "Did you?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, do you lose some money?" He's like, "No, I didn't lose a little money. I lost everything on this game. I'm gonna go myself after the game." And then every single play in the fourth quarter is like, "Bullshit, man. Like, oh, 30 years of this." And then we're outside, and for some reason, because it was 10 to 14-degree wind chills, but we were sticking it out. And then he's just screaming the entire time. And he's like, "Man, I lost everything. 30 years of this." And he's just screaming right next to us. I'm like, and then we're just all looking at each other. I'm like, yeah, this definitely seems like a guy who bet his life savings on his team. It's like, first of all, this is why I don't bet on teams that I have strong opinions on or teams that I am super attached to, because I know my vision can get clouded with certain teams that I hate. and certain teams that I like, and then I can talk myself into certain things. And you've seen that with picks on the show, or I can talk myself out of certain things because they're just players and teams that I don't necessarily love on the show or I'm known for being a hater of. So it's like I try not to let me influence that, but like don't bet the house on your favorite team because it's probably not going to work out in your favor here, especially when you have 16 players on injured reserve after Meek Robinson goes down. But this guy was absolutely losing it. I don't know if you're around any Lions fans at all, but oh, it was tough.
I actually was surrounded by Commanders fans, so it was a little less. I went to this bar out and about, and there was a couple of Lions fans like in the corner near us, and I could see them, and they saw my Amon Ross St. Brown sweatshirt. They're like, "Fuck yeah, he's one of us. Let's go." And then there's a whole nother table full of Commanders fans. Commanders fans, they're not quite as terrible as Eagles fans, but they're getting there. I feel like in the next year or so, they could be just as bad. They're from DC. They're not too far from them. They're rowdy. They haven't been very good for a long time. Their fan base has a low self esteem, and Janet Daniels is really good. But Lions fans, seeing Lions fans like have their hearts ripped out of their chest for the second year in a row, because you and I went out for the NFC title game and we turned the entire bar into a Lions bar single
Yeah.
handedly in a playoff run. And then this game, watching the Lions fans again, the same faces, it feels like, watch their team just crumble. The Lions, I know we were talking about this, but like the Lions at this point need to prove it. They need to make it back to the NFC title game. They need to make the Super Bowl period, because this era of the Lions is going to go down as their greatest in history. And imagine if it goes to they made one NFC title game. That's pathetic.
Yeah.
That cannot be their case. That cannot be their arc. They need to make a Super Bowl and ideally win it. Even if they don't win it, I still think a Super Bowl is going to go along. Just making it's going to go a long way for them. But still,
Yeah.
like this team needs to prove it. And seeing a bunch of heartbroken Lions fans broke my heart, especially when Commanders fans were just flexing on them literally right in front of their faces. I kid you not, plenty of Commanders fans went up to them and just did this and said, "Go Hogs." So apparently
Go
that's
Hogs.
apparently
It
that's the
was
Commanders.
it was
I
a
don't
gay
know.
bar. The Commanders kept saying, "Go Hog," and I said, "Who are the Hogs that are going? Why are they going?"
I don't see any pigs in here. No pigs in sight.
No, it's great.
Terrible.
I feel like there's a certain segment of Lions fans who did get too arrogant too quickly with the Lions, but like the thing I feel like people need to understand with Jared Goff is like, is he Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, or Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger? No, he's like Philip Rivers, Matt Ryan level, like where he has the capability of getting to a Super Bowl and winning one. But like, I feel like him just being like a Matt Ryan type quarterback, it's like, okay, is he terrible? No. Was Matt Ryan terrible? But did they both have like games like this? Yeah, all the
Hmm.
time. And I feel like Matt Ryan would like maybe win a Super Bowl with this Lions team, but not a lock. Would he win a Super Bowl with that in that Rams era? I don't know. Maybe not early in his career, but I feel like he's like Matt Ryan, but he's not awful. Like
Yeah.
he's not one of the worst quarterbacks in the league where I feel like he just gets so much hate and people are like, "Oh yeah, see Jared Goff again." It's like, "Okay, well, at least he's been to a Super Bowl. At least he's gotten to a conference championship where most of the top quarterbacks haven't even got there."
Yeah, exactly. I do think that another guy you could compare him to, although it sounds like an insult when I say it, but like old Joe Flacco, like Joe Flacco in the early 2010s with the Ravens, he was another guy that was elite most of the time, but then also had these games that took him out of that conversation. I feel like he's on the border. I think 9 to 11 is like a perfect spot for Jared Goff, because this guy at his best is definitely a top 10 quarterback. At his worst, he can be maybe low teens. But for him, this game, like this is what people think of Jared Goff with, sadly. Even though for him, he played in an MVP level type of season for them. And he's obviously helped them tremendously get to the level they are now, being the one seed. Like he plays a part in that for sure, especially with how great the offense has been. Um, it's just, what legacy will he be? Can he be a Matt Ryan that makes the Super Bowl again and wins one, or is he just going to be a guy that we forget in history? Sadly,
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like he'll be right around there. But will he win a Super Bowl with this Lions team? I can't definitively say yes anymore. Now they get the Ravens and the Bills treatment until they go out there and do it. Like, all right, we have to actually see you go out there and do it. With same thing with Philadelphia, whereas we have Philadelphia and the Rams. Rams are a team who have gotten to a Super Bowl and won, but this quickly turned into a snow globe game. One of the most entertaining playoff games this weekend, where I feel like every single game this weekend was a good game, genuinely throughout at least the first three quarters. With Kansas City, and then the Lions and Commanders was a huge upset. Jane Daniels making a conference championship before Dak Prescott. And then you have the Rams and Philadelphia Eagles here. Again, Rams outgain the Philadelphia Eagles, but the Eagles win the turnover battle. Stafford has a ridiculously laughable fumble in this game, bad interception, and then Philadelphia just makes more plays and comes out on top when they need to.
Yeah, this game, this is like one of these games that when I see it, I wish that in some cases that the NFL had a best of 7 series. Because in this, I feel like if we played 7 games, first of all, the CTE would go crazy. Anyways, but best of 7 series, I feel like this would go 7 games. This game was a battle. The snow, the the whole snow globe aspect to it. Saquon Barkley rushing for 200 yards in this game. Impeccable. The defense is making plays and coming down to the fourth quarter to win this game. Matt Stafford had a chance to tie the game also in the last few minutes, and ultimately it fell out. But just a classic game, exceptional. Um, but the better team won. This team went out there when everyone was passing on Saquon or they didn't want to pay him the money. They went and gave this guy just a very simple contract. I think it was a 2-year deal for Saquon Barkley. And this could go down as the greatest offseason addition in NFL history. This guy is like 100 yards away from breaking the most rushing yards, regular season and postseason of all time. The only guy ahead of him is Terrell Davis, who single handedly won the Broncos 2 rings back to back years in 97 and 98, which helped make John Elway the man he is today to some extent. Obviously, John Elway was great, but was a perpetual choker. Now he's not. Eagles, the better team. They've been the better organizational team as far as the moves that they've made in the offseason and the draft as well. But the Rams overexceeded this year. I didn't expect them to be as good as they did. They went toe to toe with the best team in the NFC, arguably. So credit to the Rams and what they were able to accomplish, especially in a game like this.
Do you think that it felt like the Rams would have won though if it wasn't for the snow in this game? Because I felt like
Yeah.
just the grip on the ball, like I know Kyron Williams had a fumble last time, but maybe Matt Stafford doesn't have that ridiculous fumble that he had as well here. But I felt like with the Rams, they definitely had a chance to win this game, and especially at the end of it, like Sean McVay said, like I felt like at the end of the game, it's like I just thought we were gonna go down there, march down there, and win. Where it's like I feel like you had definitely an opportunity to win this game where you're there at the end of it. Your defense shows up in this game, and if you just don't let Saquon Barkley run wide open for that touchdown at the end of the game, like this is a game where I feel like the Rams let it slip away. But do you feel like the Eagles have just been winning those games? Where it's like you can point to that versus Philadelphia, where it's a couple plays here, couple plays versus the Rams. They just haven't beat themselves. Jalen Hurts hasn't turned the ball over in the playoffs here, and they've been able to recover any fumbles that he's had. And then Jalen Carter on defense, as soon as he comes out for a play, he immediately comes back in, picks up Matthew Stafford in this game.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are just playing good team football overall. Because the thing with Jalen Hurts, like you look at the stat line, yeah, he only threw for 128 yards, but when he needs to make the play, he's making the play, and it's either with his legs, which he had a huge run in this game, an awesome 44-yard touchdown, but he also like got a lot of third down conversions as well, got the ball moving, kept the ball moving. So credit to him. One thing I'll say about the Rams defense is if you take 2 plays out with Saquon Barkley, for the most part, you took care of business against him. He had one massive 62-yard rush, then he had another one for 78. You take those 2 rushing plays out of it, if you guys can just stop those 2 plays specifically, we're talking about a much different game for Saquon and a much different game for the Eagles. Those are 14 points on the board that they scored simply off a 2 rush. Now the Rams, like they lost Aaron Donald this past offseason, and we thought the defense was going to be terrible. They went out and drafted basically their entire defense, and their defense played exceptional in this game. They ended up hitting on Jared Verse, who's been excellent for him. So again, I'll say it again with the Rams. The Rams absolutely overexceeded, and for the season that they had, I feel good for them moving forward for sure.
Yeah. Do you think this encourages Stafford to come back, or do you think he's just done after the season?
Well, the thing with Stafford is that he already has his ring. What would 2 Super Bowls do for his legacy? I don't know how much it would do for it. He's going to be 37. I think he still can play. It's just, does he want to? He's made a shit ton of money. He still has a shit ton of money coming to him. I don't know. It might not be. The question is, do the Rams want to continue with Matt Stafford, or do they want to look for his replacement? It's definitely not going to be Stetson Bennett at this point. I hate to say it. So they have to figure that out as well. Maybe start drafting a quarterback and start grooming them now at this point.
Yeah, because maybe you get like another year or two with Stafford where you can actually maybe you draft someone in the second or the third round. They're able to step up and replace him, or you at least figure out what you have. But I feel like this year they might move on from Kyron Williams because with how Sean McVay moved on from Jared Goff and then how he just turns out running backs, it's like he's been beating him into the ground for a couple of years now. Kyron Williams has had the highest usage rate in the league this year, and now they've lost 2 games versus the Philadelphia Eagles this season because he fumbled, and that was the difference in the game.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're entering year 3 now of him. So next year they're going to have to figure out if they want to pay him. I could see them using him next year, but they should draft his replacement. Maybe, and I keep saying his name because I want to know where he goes. Cam Scatabo would be somebody that would fit greatly for the Rams. And so, will he be the guy that fits in with them? The way that they've been able to draft the last 2 years, they really haven't missed on anybody. So, I'd like to see how the Rams turn it out. Maybe they franchise tag Kyron Williams this upcoming year and ride out until they have to pay him and trade him. But his stock is super high right now. So maybe they consider doing that and maybe getting someone like a T. Higgins. I know the Bengals would love to have Kyron Williams potentially. So we'll see who ends up going there. Or maybe the Steelers make a swap for him and George Pickens. Those would be fits that would work great for each other.
Yeah, trade Jalen Warren, throw him in there as well. Maybe you swap Najee Harris and Kyron Williams. Maybe Sean McVay thinks he can unlock the monster that is Najee Harris, doing just enough to get 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns.
He he knows how to do if you want to talk about C's get degrees, that is Najee Harris. That man will get the bare minimum to get paid. But credit to the Eagles, like I said, credit to the Commanders. Now the game we've all been waiting to talk about. The Ravens and Bills. This game, everyone said going into it would be the one that defines the legacies potentially of these two guys. Josh Allen, everyone would point to who he's beaten in the playoffs. Now we can say he's beaten Lamar twice. And then Lamar Jackson, obviously he's trying to make it back to his AFC title game. He's got this playoff record looming over him as well. And this game pulled no punches. Let's see, we had the Bills. James Cook had a great game in this game. Josh Allen played well. Lamar Jackson had 2 costly turnovers. And then the scapegoat of all, Mark Andrews. They score with a minute and 30 seconds left. They go for the 2 point conversion, and Mark Andrews drops it. In this game, like as far as legacy wise, does this give Lamar a pass as far as the legacy? He did march down and score a touchdown, but at the same time, Mark Andrews drops that ball. What would, as far as how this is going to define these two quarterbacks? How does this shake out for you?
I feel like you can't just blame Mark Andrews in this situation. I feel like that's the easy take to go out if you're a Lamar Jackson fan because a lot of people is like, well, Lamar Jackson got the ball at the end of the game, marched the ball down the field, and got a touchdown. Mark Andrews just dropped an extra point. Like, okay, that's like fast forwarding all the way to the start of someone invading a country, but not telling you exactly how the war got started, where it was instigated between two different countries here, like the political drama behind the scenes, where it's like Lamar had a fumble and a ridiculously dumb interception in the first half, and it put you in a hole where you were playing catch up in this game. And at the end of the day, that's the reason why you had to press at the end of the day, and Mark Andrews had that fumble, and that's the reason why Mark Andrews was put in a position to drop the pass. Where if you're Lamar Jackson, it's like you shouldn't have even been in this position to start the game to begin with because you had 2 turnovers that you're responsible for, and you only lost by 2 points. If one of those is a field goal, you're not worrying about Mark Andrews having to catch the ball here. When you're the most valuable quarterback in the league, like this is a situation where you can't turn the ball over in the situation versus Josh Allen in a game where Josh Allen doesn't have to do anything to beat you because all he has to do is hand the ball off to James Cook and then hand off. They immediately get 4 yards and then it's just, oh, easy pass over here to Shakur. And then, like, this is the most Josh Allen we've seen ever. He's tame, he's under control, and he really doesn't have to do too much. And he's kind of holding back in this game, and they're playing it safe versus you. And they're just saying, all right, we're fine if Baltimore beats us in this situation, but we're not going to beat ourselves because we believe when Josh Allen needs to make a play, he's either going to do it with his legs or passing it because we think you having to go out there and get 2 points is going to be a little bit far fetched. And then also in this game, you miss out on another 2 point conversion, which, would have ended up winning you the game if you just went out there and kicked it, which you can blame that on coaching. But in this game, it's like, is Mark Andrews like the sole person to blame? No, but like it does come down to when you're someone who wants to be a 3-time MVP, you're going to be the person that has to take the blame first in the situation because you fumbled the ball and then you threw an interception in this game. If we're going to hold someone like Josh Allen accountable for that, like we have to hold you accountable for that because it didn't happen all regular season. I said heading into the playoffs, we're going to see these quarterbacks who some of them didn't have that many turnovers in the regular season suddenly start turning the ball over like crazy. What did Justin Herbert do? Threw 4 interceptions in a game. What Lamar Jackson do? Have half the turnovers that he had all regular season in one single game versus Josh Allen to define the argument between these two quarterbacks. Like Josh Allen has been in the conference championship, been going head to head with Patrick Mahomes, where it's like he hasn't looked like he's melted down against Mahomes, at least not Burrow, but at least against Mahomes to the same level that you just look completely lost and deer in the headlights. Like, sure, you drove the ball down at the end of the game, but like it shouldn't have got to that point, and the Ravens look like they should have won the game. And I picked the Bills to win this game, but Baltimore should have won that game.
Yeah, I agree. That fumble in the first half where he literally basically just drops the ball out of his own hands. That was an ugly fumble. The interception was too. Again, you mentioned about the MVP conversation, right? Lamar versus Josh Allen. That's what the argument has been all season long. And who played the better game? Josh Allen played the better game. I know numbers wise, Lamar probably has better numbers, right? 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, but Josh Allen didn't turn the ball over. He still had 2 total touchdowns. He played well. He was extremely efficient in this game as well. So they didn't ask to do much for Josh Allen. They leaned on the running game like they have all season, but credit to the Bills in this game and the Ravens. I mean, this isn't an unfamiliar conversation that we've had. We've talked about this the last 7 years with Lamar, and I know he's had some injuries as well, but he's had some ugly playoff games. I do think he played better in this game than he has in previous playoff games. But at the end of the day, you're still coming home short. I mean, Mark Andrews did have a fumble in this game too. That didn't help his causes either. However, again, it was 21-10 when it went into halftime. The Bills, they score in the second half, they're done, and it's a blowout at this point. We could be talking about a totally different game. They went out, their defense played well in the second half, and they were able to make it closer than it was, but you guys were in the hole to start. Now, I do want to talk about Josh Allen when it comes to him versus at this point, it's Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow versus who's number two behind Mahomes. If we're looking at any of these guys, right? I'm looking at these other two guys where Joe Burrow has beaten Mahomes in the playoffs. I see Josh Allen, who maybe he hasn't beat him in the playoffs, but he's had two of the greatest games maybe ever against him, where one is determined by Tyler Bass missing a field goal, and one of them is 13 seconds away from victory that ultimately his defense ruins for him. He's gone toe to toe. He's beaten Mahomes in the regular season multiple times. The only guy that beats the Chiefs in the regular season this year, and then Lamar, who's won MVPs. He's one of the all-time greatest running quarterbacks, but made one AFC title game, hasn't showed up in the playoffs, and this is a guy that should be above both of these guys because I think in some ways he is one of the most unique quarterbacks in the league, or at least the most influential, at least. So if we're talking about the top two quarterbacks in the league, I don't think Lamar can be at number two at this point if we're looking at playoff success as well. I think you've got to give Josh Allen and Joe Burrow an edge in this case.
Yeah, I feel like I give Joe Burrow the edge here because Joe Burrow, like every time he's faced Josh Allen in the playoffs, he's beat them. He's the only one to beat Mahomes and the only other quarterback to get to a Super Bowl, and he had better numbers this year than both of them outside of turnovers. So I feel like Joe Burrow should still be there at number two. However, with Josh Allen, he's now 2-0 versus Lamar Jackson. Okay. And he's 0-2 versus Mahomes, but versus any other quarterback not named Joe Burrow, like Josh Allen has gone out there and beat them. And this was a team that had Derrick Henry in the backfield where they just kind of went out there, handed it to James Cook, which has really been the difference in this game. And Josh Allen has really, over the past couple years, been playing with one hand tied behind his back. For my biggest issue with the Bills, it's like, wasn't necessarily with Josh Allen, who like at some points looked frantic and was turning the ball over and had some deer in the headlights moments. But I was like, get this guy a run game. Like this guy like has been the run game for you. It felt like they're running his career into the ground. And it felt like this year they took mileage off of Josh Allen, where Josh Allen wasn't making those ridiculous runs. It felt like he doesn't feel like anymore that he has to run the offense. And now it's okay. The simple threat of having you on the field, like they also always have to have someone downfield because you can rip it to whoever. And now people are focusing on stopping James Cook in the running game. And like the real story again in this game was the running game with James Cook and then the running game with Josh Allen. But the only thing Josh Allen had to really do was just get the two brotherly shove, tush push touchdowns. And then, you know, um, he got two rushing touchdowns in this game, but it felt like he was just kind of sitting back, like, oh, this is nice. I really don't have to do too much. And the fact that Josh Allen has sat there and accepted that role is also something that makes him valuable, where he's not necessarily going for stats and harming the team's overall success because the best thing for this Buffalo team is to be a run first team. And that's when they're most dangerous in this game, where it's like back to back playoff games. You kind of dominate all the way through, and Josh Allen really doesn't have to do anything. And he doesn't feel like he has to press or turn the ball over. He's just letting the defense take care of it. And then Matt Milano and Von Miller turning back the clock in this playoffs. And then Matt Milano has been someone who's been in and out of the lineup for them. Von Miller's also been banged up, but those are your two best players on defense. And if you have a play where you tip it up in the air or able to strip Mahomes or get an interception, it's going to be because of one of those two guys. And I feel like both of them have been the real impact this game, just with Matt Milano knocking down passes, Von Miller picking up that fumble in this game. It's like the real story is like it isn't Josh Allen versus Lamar. Like that's like the simple way to look at this game. I feel like a lot of people default to. It's like it's just this transformation of this Buffalo team to a run team and being an even more physical team on offense than, oh, let's just make Josh Allen run around and figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. The addition of James Cook, honestly, I'd also point to like a Ty Johnson as well and Ray Davis. They've filled in greatly for them as well. They've been able to surround him with a lot of reliable receivers, receivers that maybe don't stand out. I think they kind of took a piece out of the Chiefs' playbook to some extent. The Chiefs, they moved on from their star receiver. They filled in with a lot of solidified receivers, but maybe not household names, right? They move on from Tyreek, they move on from Stephon Diggs. Khalil Shakur has been excellent for them this year. He's been somewhat of like his lad McConkey to some extent. You have a big physical Mac Hollins who's been good for him. Curtis Samuel, who's nice and quick. Two reliable tight ends, and then you still get a veteran and Amari Cooper in there. So I feel like the way that they've been able to revolutionize the receiver core, especially with all the questions that I had for the Bills entering this regular season, all the cuts they had to make, basically gutting their team offensively and defensively by losing Diggs and then pretty much their entire defense. The fact that they've been as excellent as they've been, 13-4, 8-0 at home, and then also revitalize the receiving core. Like, got to give a lot of credit to the Bills for that. Got to give a lot of credit to Josh Allen, who's been super efficient, which wasn't always his knock past few years. I mean, he led the league in turnovers, I think, 3 years. So having only 6 picks, not having a lot of fumbles in this year, like he's been ultra efficient. So credit to him. And I do think when we come and talk about him and Patrick Mahomes, I know he's 0-3 in the postseason against him, but I don't think all of those losses were things that we can point to him as the reason they lost. He had basically a perfect game in that 13-second game. This last year, Tyler Bass misses a key field goal to end it. Like, I do think that they are close to beating the Chiefs, and I think that they are capable of beating the Chiefs. We're obviously going to preview that later, but uh, I think they're closer than ever to beating the Chiefs.
Yeah. No, they're definitely. I feel like they're close here, and I feel like this is going to be as close as they'll ever be. But they'll have to stay disciplined here. The thing is, though, with this game, is that Baltimore gave you three golden opportunities in this game where you're about to drive down, almost like take the momentum all the way to your side with Mark Andrews, and then he gets stripped and fumbles. Lamar Jackson ends up spotting you in this game. Chiefs aren't going to do that. Patrick Mahomes isn't necessarily going to be a turnover machine the way Lamar Jackson is. Maybe you get an interception out of him, but that's about it. And then are you going to have a fumble from Travis Kelsey in this game? Like, probably not. So, like, if you take that away from this game where you have three turnovers, like, you probably lose to Baltimore. So now you're going to go out there and beat Kansas City is going to be the real question if they play error free football. Because I feel like at times, I don't know about you, but watching this game, it felt like there are certain moments in the game where I'm like, why isn't Derrick Henry touching the ball right now? Where I felt like it took them way too long in this game, like taking like criticism outside of Lamar Jackson for the Ravens. It seems like at times this team tries to do too much in the playoffs, like last year versus the Chiefs, where they just needed to play like Raven style football and they would have had a chance at beating them. The Chiefs didn't even score in the second half. And then this game, it's like, why did it take until the fourth quarter to get Derrick Henry going? There were certain moments where I felt like in the first half they needed to get him going. Like, why are we waiting versus Buffalo? Like, we don't need to spot them in this game. Like, this isn't a game we should be trailing because now they have an excellent run game and it's going to be tough to stop. And they're going to make us. It felt like the strategy in this game for the Bills was like, we're just going to make Baltimore beat us because we don't believe they actually can. Last time we beat ourselves and tried to do too much.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the last playoff game, right? They gave Derrick Henry the ball 26 times, and he ran all over the Steelers. And I think that the Bills' defense, running wise, is is a little bit worse than the Steelers' run defense. They got 16 carries out of Derrick Henry, and he still rushed for 5 yards per carry and he had a touchdown. Like he still had a good Derrick Henry game, but this is what they've always done. It feels like in the playoffs with Lamar. Their identity is the run game. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, probably the two hardest people to stop in all of football when it comes to running the football, and they seem to abandon that every time when they're in the postseason. They crumble. Now, is this a criticism on Lamar? Is this a criticism on the offensive coordinator? Is this a criticism on John Harbaugh? Because John Harbaugh hasn't made a Super Bowl in a long time. We talk about Mike Tomlin and his lack of playoff success. Ravens have had more, obviously, a lot more playoff success with Lamar. Um, but these key errors, like this goes into the game plan at that point. Is this a criticism of John Harbaugh potentially? Because obviously their offensive coordinator has been good for them, but I feel like we still should talk about John Harbaugh a little bit as far as abandoning the game plan that they've worked with all season in key moments in the postseason multiple times.
Yeah, because like Derrick Henry having 16 carries, like no, you need to run your offense. Like similarly to the Buffalo Bills, it felt like they were trying to run the offense through Lamar, which is fine, but also you have to put into context that Zay Flowers is out and Rashad Bateman got hurt. It's like, and then that fumble comes from you trying to run your offense through Lamar, and then I feel like with this team, it's like, no, you need to do it like Buffalo does it, where we're running the offense through James Cook and we're running it on first and second down. And then once the game gets close, then Josh Allen is touching it on second and third down, or we're running play action. They stay disciplined with that, where and that's like the question I had with the Bills is like, are they going to stay disciplined with the run game? When it's like the Ravens, like they didn't stay disciplined with it. Derrick Henry only got 16 carries and it was too little too late. Where if you started the game just running the offense through him, where Buffalo should be more concerned about Derrick Henry than Lamar Jackson. The point of Derrick Henry is to make you forget that Lamar's even on the field, but that just didn't happen this game. But I felt like that should have been your recipe for success out of the get go, because why wouldn't you want to take pressure off of Lamar Jackson? It makes no sense.
It feels like the just like with Lamar, how he says he's afraid to face Mahomes. It feels like the Ravens were trying to get Lamar his numbers rather than they were trying to win his game, trying to get him the stats that would solidify him over Josh Allen. And this game should be all about just beating the Bills at what you're good at. You're good at running the football with the two most dominant running players of all time. Get those guys the ball. Lamar Jackson, I mean, he had 6 carries, but these were all just breaking down in the pocket and making scrambles. Like it wasn't designed run plays for Lamar. So again, it's the Ravens abandoning their run game when it matters to them. Like this is what they've been good at the entire Lamar Jackson era. You need to pound this in the playoffs rather than abandon what makes you good.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with LeBron, where it's like it's way easier for me if I make you forget I'm on the court, and then Kyrie Irving gets going, or Dwayne Wade gets going, or Kevin Love is hitting threes, or Mike Miller and Shane Battier are going berserk. Same thing with Jason Tatum. It's a lot easier for Jason Tatum to score when Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser are coming in and shooting the lights out. Jalen Brown is going. You have Derek White and Drew Holiday hitting shots here. Like it's a lot easier for him to get going. It's a lot easier. Like the list goes on. It's just way easier for your superstar to get going when you have a luxury of having someone like Derrick Henry. It's like where you just didn't utilize him right, where it's like you need to look at what Philadelphia is doing next season and what the Bills did to you, because this is a game where frankly you should have won. Like I felt like every like metric of this game, like if it wasn't for those turnovers, you would have won. Like just take the Lamar fumble out of it and you probably still win. Just don't spot them going into the second half. Like, and then you came in with a game plan where you dominated. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, but this is like, if the Bills want to do it, like, this is their chance here. This is their chance this year if they want to get it done.
They have a chance to upset Chiefs and pretend and block them from winning three straight. So I'm excited to preview that game next tomorrow night when we talk about the conference championship previews. But around the NFL, a lot of things happen behind the scenes that you might have missed. One of them being the Lions' great offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, is now officially the head coach of the Chicago Bears with a chance to potentially unlock Caleb Williams, a guy who obviously didn't have a bad rookie season, but definitely struggled, whether getting the ball out quickly or just bad offensive lines and a number of other excuses we can use. But Ben Johnson, Bears head coach, how do we like the hire?
I'm intrigued, and I feel like this was the number one destination I wanted him to go. Other pundits were saying this much later than us because we mentioned it at the beginning of the season when we knew Matt Eberflus was gone. It's like, well, Ben Johnson's going to be available. The best situation for him is going to be Chicago because you essentially already have the roster there. It's not a complete overhaul with Dan Campbell, but my question was, is he going to have the mentality where it's like, I'm coming from Detroit, and even though this is the best destination, do I want to go to Chicago and then have to face that team I was with twice a year? And the answer was yes. So that shows that Ben Johnson doesn't care about it. And then I was worried he was going to commit career suicide with the Raiders. Um, that crisis was averted. And then he just looked at Trevor Lawrence as like, nah. And honestly, I feel like part of this too should be an indictment on Trevor Lawrence because the Jaguars' job was open. He could go to Jacksonville and not have to face his former team twice a year. But he's like, no, Trevor Lawrence is so over the hill, so unsavable that I don't even want to bother with him. I don't want to be that Trevor Lawrence's sloppy thirds where I'm kind of Caleb Williams first. Like it was kind of like weird for like a week or two, and then Matt Eberflus left. They're like, okay, that was strange, but I feel like I never got to get the full experience there, which is what Ben Johnson's going to be like when he takes over the Chicago Bears. So I feel like this will be a good opportunity. And with the Lions, he is a really good play caller, but anytime you do have a really good play caller under someone like Dan Campbell, who is just such a massive personality where everyone wants to run through a wall through him, I'm just going to be interested to see his coaching style. So, do I think he's going to be the best coach in the league next year? No. But what I do think he'll do is establish a great run game for Caleb Williams and then focus on the offensive line. If he starts to do that, I feel like he can be a successful head coach, but I need to see like how he's going to be as far as a personal head coach. Like, is he going to be someone like a Kyle Shanahan, or is he going to be more like Nick Sirianni, or is he going to be someone who's kind of like a demon like Sean McVay?
Yeah, I am leaning towards him being more like a Sean McVay. If he can do to Caleb Williams what he did to the Lions, which is help them get the ball out quick, flashy plays, and ultimately preventing sacks and getting a good offensive line for him, I think Caleb Williams is going to be amazing with him. And I was high on Caleb Williams entering this year, and I think he still has the talent to do so. He showed me enough this rookie season to be like, okay, he has what it takes to be really good in this league. I do think he'll be better than Trevor because prior to the Washington loss, which seems to have deflated their team because that's when they went on their 11 game losing streak to follow. Prior to that game, he was balling. He had a couple of games where he was scoring multiple touchdowns a game and getting the ball out quick and completing a lot of passes. And I think Ben Johnson can craft up a scheme good enough for him, surround him with the right receivers, implement DJ Moore the way they should, implement if they bring him back Keenan Allen, or better yet, utilize the tight end position like he has with Sam Laporta, but with Cole Kmet. That could be something that'll be a sight to see. So their priority is going to be getting a running back, whether it's paying them in the free agency market or getting them in the draft. Maybe someone like a Cam Scatabo potentially. Who knows? And then getting an offensive line right. If they can get all that, then this Bears team, I think, can win their division next year. With how good their defense has the potential to be and how good their offense had the potential to be this past year, then I do think they can win that division, especially with the questions with the Vikings, the Lions losing two key coordinators, and the Packers having question marks as well.
Yeah, and I feel like a good defensive coordinator for this team would be Robert Saleh. If he's considering a defensive coordinator, because he's someone who has been a head coach, has been a defensive coordinator in a Super Bowl here, so I feel like that would make a lot of sense for Ben Johnson there. But yeah, I'm interested to see. We've seen like a couple of young head coaches like go out there and flop, but I hope that he's a really good coordinator. But this is going to be tough because now he's going to be the person where he may be turned into quickly the most loved person in Detroit to now the biggest villain in Detroit, where now he's the Benedict Arnold. And even though he's doing what's best for his career, going out there and coaching Caleb Williams, if he's the reason Caleb Williams turns into Patrick Mahomes or one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league, and he makes Caleb Williams into a clutch quarterback and knocks the Lions out of the division lead, like how heartbreaking is it going to be for that fan base where it's like you just see your offensive coordinator after 30 years of pain go over to your rival team who has been dominated by the Packers and can suddenly turn them around, and he turns Caleb Williams into a superstar? Like, yeah,
That's
literally
pain. That's
can't catch a
generational.
break.
That's generational pain right there.
Generational pain where he ends your Super Bowl window, and he has the potential. Like, that's why I didn't want to see him go to Chicago, even though I knew that was the best decision for him. But like day one, after you
Yeah.
lose,
Just
like out the
immediately
door,
jumps to the
it was
Bears.
yesterday, it was a Monday, but like Sunday, he rested, and then I'm a Bear now. Like, what? The next day. That's the craziest part about Ben Johnson. And like you do know like this is a situation now he knows Dan Campbell, he knows all of his tricks, and now people are gonna be like, okay, he's responsible partly responsible for the Lions turning it around. But I feel like people are giving Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn all the credit here, but like Dan Campbell also like will know his tricks up the sleeve. So that's gonna be a heated rivalry. And then you throw in the Vikings who never make it easy. We'll see what they do with JJ McCarthy next year. And then the Packers again next year. If Jordan Love can stay healthy throughout the entire season, maybe we see like Jordan Love show up before Toyotathon, before Thanksgiving. Like that's gonna be
Miracles do
another
happen.
scary division.
Yeah, miracles do happen. We could see it before Toyotathon potentially. Packers, I still think they're going to be a team that you don't want to sleep on. I do think they should address their defense, but this Bears and Lions rivalry just amplified tremendously, especially because I you could argue the Bears off their total weapons available to them. Their defense is much better than I think than the Lions, at least what they can unlock. I think who I've heard is tied to their defensive coordinator position is Robert Sala and Dennis Allen as defensive coordinators. I wouldn't really hate either one of them, but I do think Robert Sala would be a better fit for them. But I do think that all the issues that we had with Caleb Williams in year one is not going to be the case this time around, especially because he's the guy that got sacked 68 times. He held the ball longer than anybody in the league. I think Ben Johnson can get it out a lot quicker.
Yeah, definitely. And with the Packers, like their defense, I feel like they always get thrown under the bus, but like they only gave up 22 points to Philadelphia. Like,
That's
I
true.
feel like their defense wasn't really the problem in that game, is the fact that they didn't have their top 3 wide receivers versus the best defense in the NFL. Like, sometimes that hurts, you know? Sometimes having wide receivers on the field is important, but I compared Caleb Williams to kind of Jared Goff's first year with Jeff Fisher, where he had good stats this year, where Jared Goff was completely lost. Where it's like, don't give up on him. Like, if he gets the right head coach or someone like Ben Johnson shows up there, um, like he will be one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and he can definitely be better than Goff because he's more talented than him. I feel like the one thing I'll still be concerned about with Caleb Williams is he doesn't really seem like he has that clutch gene in him, where it seems like he lets the emotions of the game, he lets the adversity get to him a little bit too quickly, which is fine. It's normal for someone that young. Sometimes people have to grow into that and grow into the clutch gene. But do you feel like that concerns you at all? And then do you understand any of the people maybe a little bit hesitant to proclaim Ben Johnson the next great head coach, because we've seen so many offensive coordinators go and fail other places?
Yeah, I mean, Chicago is a lot more dysfunctional, I think, than what Detroit is at this point. I do think that Caleb Williams, he still has a lot to prove, even though I do think I've seen what he could be, but we saw the same thing with Trevor Lawrence. And there's been plenty of other guys that were the prince that were promised that did not become what they were. So Caleb Williams still has to prove it. I do also fear like we got to remember that offense. We have Jameer Gibbs, David Montgomery, two Pro Bowlers. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown, top five, top 10 wide receiver in the league. Sam Laporta, one of the best tight ends in the league. And then an exceptional offensive line. Like that offense, you also can give credit to Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes for building that offense. So you could also, at the same time, if you want to argue him being the next Sean McVay, you could also, on the other end, argue him as the next Adam Gase potentially. In the case where he was the head coach, he was the offensive coordinator for Peyton Manning and Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, and at one point they had Edgar and James on that team as well. Like they had four of the best offensive weapons in NFL history in the 2000s. So Adam Gase, of course, looked like the greatest offensive coordinator. It's easy to do that when you have Peyton Manning and all the other guys I mentioned there. Now, I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's Adam Gase, but caution a little bit when it comes to these coordinators because there's plenty of examples. Oh, how about a perfect guy to talk about to pivot to? Josh McDaniels, a guy who was the offensive coordinator for the Patriots when they had Gronk and they had Edelman. And at one point, they had the killer and Aaron Hernandez. Like they had so much talent for that Patriots team. And then Josh McDaniels goes to the Broncos, fails as a head coach after getting caught cheating and drafting Tim Tebow. He gets fired. He comes back, coaches the Rams for a little bit. And then he goes to the Raiders. And it was a complete nightmare with the Raiders as a head coach, where they literally formed a protest against him to demand he gets fired so that Antonio Pierce can take over. And the Raiders are still paying him for the next 3 years because of it. And now he's the new offensive coordinator for, you guessed it, the New England Patriots. This is like what, his fifth stint as the offensive coordinator for the Patriots? He's now coming back with Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, because when you left your job the first time, it works out the fifth, fourth, and eighth time when you don't have Tom Brady. It's like, for me, I feel like the reason why Josh McDaniels was successful was Tom Brady changing his play in the huddle and audibling out of it. Like, that's what made Josh McDaniels successful, was Tom Brady audibling out of whatever boring, uninspired, terrible play that he called, where it's like, in reality, it's like, Josh McDaniels' offense is not that interesting. I don't see him as this above average coordinator. He's more as someone like a Matt Nagy. Even though I don't think he's ever been as good or will ever be as good of a head coach that Matt Nagy was in his short stint in Chicago. But like, this isn't a guy where it's like, I want him to bring up and then bring along our young quarterback. Like, no, not at all. I don't feel like he's proven that he can do that. I don't feel like he's proven he can coach a rookie quarterback and bring out their full potential, where like Tom Brady like had already been established by the time Josh McDaniels had been there, right? Like he'd already been to Super Bowls, he'd already won them. So it's like, this is like, just gives me a little bit of concern with Mike Vrabel's team, where it's like, is this just going to be a hard-nosed 8-9, 9-8 team year in and year out, where they just win because of Mike Vrabel's toughness, and then they just squeak out some games that they shouldn't? But their offense just isn't going to look dynamic with Josh McDaniels. I don't think his play calling is that good, and I don't think he's like designs plays that are that interesting. Like, how many flea flickers with Julian Edelman are we going to do? Are we now just going to draft quarterbacks and turn them into receivers? Is that the new strategy we're going to keep bringing back again?
I think the biggest problem I have with the Josh McDaniels thing is you've tried it many times. If I'm going to give shit to the Jets for trying to hire Sexy Rexy after 10 years because that's the last success you've had, the last successful coordinator you've had is Josh McDaniels. And it feels like you're just going back to your ex at this point. If it didn't work the first time, didn't work the second time, didn't work the third time, like just get a new offensive coordinator. There's plenty of minds outside of Josh McDaniels that can elevate this Patriots offense, or better yet, maybe get a newer, fresher blood. I know that like Liam Cohen, right, for the Bucks has been good for them. He was floating around in conversations. Maybe he could have switched and gone to the Patriots. Plenty of other coordinators that are available. Maybe you pull somebody from college. But with Josh McDaniels, like it's just the same old Patriots. I think that Mike Vrabel can resemble that old Belichick grittiness, and Josh McDaniels is going to have that same Patriots offense. So it does give me a cause to pause for this new generation of the Patriots because I feel like they're just going back to their old flames rather than reinventing what the Patriots could be with Drake May and making an offense that's worth watching that doesn't look like it was made 20 years ago at this point. So I guess that's my biggest beef with him being the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I don't like it. Like, personally, I just don't like it. I'd rather honestly see Doug Peterson be the offensive coordinator
He would be a
or
fine
Frank
offensive
Reich.
coordinator. Frank Reich would be fine. Just make it more exciting. Um,
Eric
other head coach
Bieniemy.
Eric Bieniemy could be fine. But another signing here, Kevin O'Connell re-ups with the Vikings for a 4-year deal. Um, obviously had an exceptional season this year. Didn't plan out in the playoffs, but re-signs with the Vikings. Do you like this re-signing for Kevin O'Connell?
I think so. I think he got the best anyone could have gotten out of Sam Darnold like that season. Like, I don't feel like Sam Darnold was ever meant to look that good, and I feel like Sam Darnold being that good was honestly more fluky than what happened to him in the playoffs. Like, people saying like, "Oh, Sam Darnold's gonna be fine." Like, yeah, Sam Darnold's gonna be fine. Like, that's gonna kind of be the rest of his career, where you needed Aaron Jones, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Naylor to get to the playoffs and be 14-3 and look above average. And then when you had a chance to take that team to the next level, you didn't. And then you completely crumbled in the two biggest games of the season. You only lost to two teams last season. I feel like Kevin O'Connell got the best that he could out of this team. And if you kept Mike Zimmer for that long, it's like, sure, you can keep Kevin O'Connell because I feel like he's proven to be a great offensive head coach. He's proven that he'll will this team back into the playoffs when it's not like kind of an end of the year road for Kirk Cousins here. So yeah, I feel like he's done enough to earn an extension for the Vikings because there's no way they should have been that good in the regular season. And the thing that people don't get with some of these franchises is not all of these franchises are like the fans. Fans think that teams are trying to win a Super Bowl every single year. No, they are not. Like, the owner doesn't give a fuck. Are his ticket sales up? Are we having a fun regular season? Is everyone enjoying it here? And do the players like the head coach? Yes. Okay. I don't mind signing an extension for Kevin O'Connell where fans are like, oh my God, he's lost to Daniel Jones in the playoffs and then he got bounced after you went 14-3. It's like, yeah, but they just had a really good regular season, probably really good as far as ticket sales, concession. The owners like makes money, makes sense. We had a good regular season. Of course, I'll sign you to an extension, give you more money because you're making me money. If I win a Super Bowl, that's nice. And that's kind of the sentiment with most owners. Some owners care a lot about winning. Some owners are psychotic about winning, but some owners are just like, okay, we had a good season. It was profitable. Good enough for me. And if we win a Super Bowl, that's nice.
Yeah, I don't know if the Vikings owner is like that. I think they'd like to win one, but I do see what you're saying. Kevin O'Connell, I think if you're going to win a Super Bowl with the Vikings, I think Kevin O'Connell of like 6 head coaches in the NFL, I think he's one of those coaches that could do that for you. Especially what we saw with Sam Darnold this season. I think he's an exceptional head coach. So, I think that yeah, absolutely that he's a perfect fit for them. Re-signing them is great. Um, but some head coaches, yeah, some owners don't care. I think prime example is the Jags. They don't care about winning. Now, one other hire that slipped through the cracks that I forgot to announce was the Colts hire Will Anaromo as the new defensive coordinator. And so he takes over. Colts defense did not play great this year. Bengals defense didn't play great either. But we know, as people who have watched the Bengals the last few years, that Lou Anarumo is a great coordinator. Him hiring as the Colts, especially when you have Shane Steichen as an offensive mind on the other side of the ball, look out for the Colts. If they go out and get somebody great on defense and they get maybe a good pass rush, like this is a hire that's underrated that people might not talk about.
No, this is a great hire for them because the Colts defense has shown potential like this season, and you've watched them at times. It's like, okay, there is potential with the Colts defense. We just need that right guy to push all the right buttons. And the Bengals had injuries on their defense, and maybe it was he had just been there for too long, but like he was the one that came up with the brilliant plan that ended up getting them to the Super Bowl, and they ended up beating the Kansas City Chiefs. Like Lou Anarumo is one of the most brilliant defensive coordinators in the NFL. I feel like he's definitely top 10 right now as far as defensive minds. And I feel like what he did with the Bengals with some of the pieces he had on that defense, like he coached them to a level where elevated them to a Super Bowl level, and they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And he's done that multiple times to Kansas City. And then he also absolutely dismantled the Buffalo Bills offense defensively as well here, where they went to Buffalo, made it look like Cincinnati had a home game and absolutely destroyed them. Like I feel like Lou Anarumo like is going to be a great defensive coordinator for Indianapolis. The problem is going to be it's hard to coach your defense when you don't have a quarterback. And next season, are the Colts going to have a quarterback? Is Anthony Richardson the answer? And is Anthony Richardson going to pull his head out of his ass? I don't think so. So with the Colts, like, sure, your defense will be better, but is your quarterback still going 13 for 27? Is he still
Yeah.
going 9 for 18, 7 for 20? Like, is Anthony Richardson still playing terrible and then getting injured for like 4 to 5 out of the 17 games here? Yeah, probably. So if you don't move on from him or he doesn't figure it out, like it's not gonna matter. You're still not
Yeah.
gonna win your division.
Yeah. I would have to agree. So they have a lot of improvement to do in this scenario here. But we've talked about the divisional rounds. We talked about the latest head coaching hires. Next episode, we probably will hear about where Aaron Glenn goes. He had a meeting with the Jets today, and then he has a hiring with the Saints. It's probably going to be the Jets or Saints for Aaron Glenn. I would prefer the Saints for Aaron Glenn, but I don't know if I think either one's going to be great for Aaron Glenn personally.
Yeah, I like the Saints. I feel like the Saints are a team I don't mind him seeing in, and I can picture him there. And I feel like the Saints are like, you know what? He's gonna be like, you gave Dennis Allen how long? Like you gave like the suburban mom himself 3 years to be the head coach until you fired him midway through his third season. I get he was, under Sean Payton there, and you wanted to keep the same regime, but like if you kept Dennis Allen for that long, I feel like the Saints will give him a chance and allow him an opportunity to build his own team because it is a massively messed up situation where like cap wise aging players like we have to do an overhaul of this whole roster, but it could be a situation with the Commanders where if you get the right quarterback that falls in your lap, all that takes is that franchise changing guy and then suddenly you're off to the races here. But it'll be that, and then who's going to be his offensive coordinator to help him turn around the Saints, because he's going to need to build it up with someone there where Dan Campbell kind of built up that team with Aaron Glenn coaching the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Saints would be the best fit. I don't think anybody going to the Jets is going to be in a great spot overall. I know that Elvin Kamara is very supportive of Darren Rizzi taking over. Um, but, we'll see what they say about that. But Aaron Glenn, I do have my question marks of him as a head coach. I do think that he's a good leader. I just don't know how great of a head coach he'll be. He'll have to prove it. I don't think the Lions were successful over these last few years because of their defense necessarily. So I'll see how he does with the Saints. I think that that division is in a perfect position where if you can successfully rebuild the Saints, you could own that division for a while. Panthers, they're still very far away from that. The Falcons, is Michael Penix the answer? I don't think the few times that we saw him that he answered that question necessarily. The Bucks are getting older, so you're still in a position where that division can be yours if you can figure out your salary cap and you can get your quarterback of the future, and then in no time you'll be fine for the Saints.
Yeah, I feel like that'll be interesting. It's tough because you're not going to have an opportunity to get like your top choice at quarterback. So, do you want to go with someone you don't want, or do you want to go with a piece that's really going to change your team fundamentally, like on offense here? Because this team would be crazy to bring back Derek Carr next year.
I feel like what they should do, if this is going to be your rebuild year, do what you've been needing to do for a decade. Just take the cap hits and just be bad and just be terrible. Because next year, you could see Arch Manning potentially in the draft, ideally, or at least just a better quarterback class than what we have this year. So why not just suck and be really bad? And then next year, you go out and get your Arch Manning, or you go out and get whoever else might be available. Carson Beck, maybe you get him. But at this point, like, go out there and be bad, rebuild your offensive line while you can. Go out and find your Alvin Kamara replacement. Whether you cut him or not, we don't know, or trade him potentially. And then you still have Chris Olave there. You still have the Hall of Fame numbers of Marquez Valdez, Stanley, Patently. And then your defense, like, go out and get rid of the Cam Jordans of the world and rebuild the Saints. The Saints are holding on to the Drew Brees era a little too long. Drew Brees has been retired for 3 years now. Go on. I know that these guys have been great for you. I know you guys almost made that Super Bowl that one time with that non-call, but it's over. Break up. End it. It's a breakup that has not happened, and it needs to happen. You guys have negative $90 million in cap space this upcoming offseason. Just suck and stop trying to compete. Get rid of Derek Carr, get rid of everybody, and just be terrible. And then I'll believe in the Saints. I don't care how bad you
Yeah.
are. Just don't go 0-17.
Yeah, what I heard from that was go out there, get keep MVS, sign him to an extension, get Adam Thielen, go out there, get Juju Smith Schuster and Kadarius Tony, and trade for Will Levis. Okay.
Fuck it. Why not?
Adam Thielen too. Adam's out there still. Let's go.
Yeah. Just get a bunch of old people. Just destroy the confidence of one young rookie quarterback. Who cares? But nonetheless, college football, we've updated our head coachings and divisional rounds. Let's talk about the little people back there in the college football world. We had the national title game, right? Ohio State wins the national title against Notre Dame. The big story here, a lot of people are bitching about Ohio State winning because they were the eighth seed. Everyone's bitching about the college playoff bracket. Is 12 teams too much? Did it ruin college football? The transfer portal, NIL deals, all that shit. This was the first year, really, of this all coming into culmination. I personally really liked the college football bracket, and I feel like you feel the same way. But this has been the big controversy of it all. Is was this bracket good for college football, and did it make it more interesting? Your
Yes.
thoughts? Yes.
Absolutely. Like four teams make it on a board where we know there is some favoritism and some buffoonery going on behind closed doors. What team's president or head coach is going to throw their daughter at someone on a board so we can give them a more favorable, and then it's based off of weighted schedule. How tough was your schedule this year instead of just how well you did in your conference, what was your strength of schedule, and then you would just have these massive blowouts, and it felt like it was never a competition. It was a slow death to whoever was going to play LSU that one year, Clemson that one year, or Alabama that one year. Once in a while you'd get an upset, but usually there was this one team that would just go out there and dominate. And the truth of the matter is it's a lot harder to do that over a 3 or 4 game playoff, which is why 12 teams makes it way more interesting because now you have games that are actually competitive. We had that crazy Longhorns versus ASU game. Even the Longhorns game versus Ohio State like came down to the last play, where you just should have run the ball, and then Quinn Ewers ends up turning it over at the end of it, and then Ohio State wins it. But I felt like this was much more competitive football and more interesting football because people are like, oh, well, no, the best team won't win. It's like, okay, do you have time to sit here for 4 years while I tell you about every single upset in sports history. How about we go through like wild card teams winning the Super Bowl and the Giants, the Dallas Mavericks beating the Miami Heat in the finals, the Red Sox winning the World Series coming back from '03, the Bruins in the playoffs in the NHL the past few years winning the President's Cup and not actually going out there and winning the Stanley Cup. Like it can go on forever. And I just did a little flick of the surface of upsets and examples of the best team not winning the game. It's the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Like, oh, the best team didn't win the national championship. Like, really? No, the best team in the playoffs won the national championship because they're the one who went through the entire regular season and the gauntlet of the playoffs and came out on top. So they are, in fact, the best team of the playoffs because we had an entire playoffs to figure out who the best team was. If it was gonna just if it should have just been the best team, why isn't the number one team just the champion and we anoint them without playing any other games? Well, that doesn't leave anything up to chance or showing up or being clutch or what sports is all about, which is the underdog and coming out on top. Where we had the eighth and the seventh seed in the national championship. Like, no, that's what football is all about. That's what basketball is about. That's what hockey and like every sport known to man played. Hell, we had two world wars where the underdog came out on top.
Yeah, you're damn right. And I also think like had we applied this to the previous championships, right? When Alabama had the dynasty that they had, when Clemson went on the run that they did, example after example after example of these dynasties, the Gators of the 2000s, had they have had this bracket, would they have still won? Because the pressure is so much more on those top seeded teams. Hence the reason why a lot of these teams ended up losing, i.e., Georgia in the first round, i.e., Oregon in the first round, i.e., Arizona State in the first round, even though it was a great game with Texas nonetheless. But every single one of these teams that got a bye in these playoffs, all of them lost in that upcoming game, and some of them were blowouts. The Ohio State versus Oregon game, again, that was supposed to be super close for the number one seed. Number one seed wet their pants against Ohio State. And then the number two seed, Georgia, Notre Dame, handles them, even though Notre Dame was essentially the underdog all season with this new head coach, technically in a rebuild, and they were able to make it to a national title game. And then all these other storylines that play into it, Texas and what they were able to accomplish this year, Arizona State, what they were able to accomplish. Arizona State, by the way, that had never made the playoffs up to this point. It makes it so much more interesting. So I don't want to hear it from anybody. It makes the um, conference championship game that they have before the playoffs so much more interesting. It makes each regular season matchup interesting because ultimately, if you have more than two losses, you're not going to make the playoffs at this point. Like, it makes each game so much more meaningful to me than okay, this team went 14-0, but they faced New Mexico State, so therefore their schedule isn't as good as Alabama's, and now they're in the stupid four-team playoffs. If anything, I think they should expand it and include more of these teams. I think they can find their sweet spot eventually, keep some of the buys, and add some extra teams to this. If anything, I think we should have more playoffs in this case, less than what we have now. Ohio State earned this national title because they went through this gauntlet of Ohio. They went through Penn State, Notre Dame, they went through Oregon, they went through Texas, they went through Tennessee, like all these teams that were excellent all season. So I don't want to hear about this fucking bracket bullshit. If you're crying about this, straight up, you're a bird. I don't want to hear it from you.
Yeah.
So fuck all these people.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like 16 to 18 teams is a sweet spot there, but like March Madness has 64 teams and it's one and done. So I feel like you could, you don't want to do that many more games. So maybe if you add another game with 16 to 18 teams, I feel like that would be the sweet spot. But there's like over 164 eligible schools for this. Like I feel like with the NFL, it's 32 teams and over half the league makes the playoffs at this point, right? Where it's like 14 teams
Slightly
make it,
less. Slightly less.
slightly
Yeah.
less than
14 out of
half the teams
32.
here. Where it's like
Yeah.
college football, it's a fraction. And I felt like college football, like with the 14 playoffs, that really wasn't as interesting to me. And my problem with college football is it's like it's just so many blowouts where it doesn't even feel competitive at all. Like this was one of like the few times where it felt competitive like during the regular season there was a little bit more to play for and it actually produced way more interesting playoff games this time around. And it like actually like piqued my interest in college football where it's like we already have so many days of the NFL and then college football. It's like you okay, do I want to watch the Longhorns win 48-7 like against this terrible team? And then sometimes you get a good game like the game versus Georgia where they end up losing, but I feel like you have like maybe 1 to 2 really close competitive college football games a week where most of it's just an absolute bloodbath.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also the element of the playoffs makes it more interesting because unlike in the pros, you might still see this in the pros, but in college, I think you're going to see it a lot more dramatized. But you can see, like, for example, I forget which player I'm thinking of. I think it was for Penn State. The quarterback of Penn State before Notre Dame went out and partied on this yacht and it was all over his Instagram. In the following game, he just completely wets his pants and they played terribly. So I think, like, with college, makes for a lot more interesting because the teams that we think are really great are also just 22-year-old kids who can easily crumble under these pressures, like we saw with Oregon, and like there's plenty other examples of this happening even in the regular season for college football. It's college football. Oregon. I mentioned Oregon earlier. I mentioned also um, like Georgia, for
Georgia.
example. Like both of these teams were excellent all season, and then when the pressure came, they crumbled. So I think picking the upset is so much easier in college football at this point because of what they're capable of, and having these just young men running it.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like this will also elevate some people's draft stock where maybe like in March Madness and NBA GM's like, okay, he showed like potential and we end up drafting Shabazz Napier and he doesn't do anything. Um, but maybe like a quarterback can play himself into like a top 10 draft pick if he plays really well throughout the college football playoffs where people weren't thinking about him and then suddenly the 12th team goes out there and wins the national championship because this quarterback shows up and balls out, and then another GM's like, okay, I'll try my luck at least. I'll see if it's out there when maybe they wouldn't have normally drafted them.
I can think of two examples of that already being the case. I mean, Quinn Ewers before the playoffs looked like a total disgrace. Like he wasn't even going to be drafted at one point. He's going to go back to college, and then he played pretty well at Texas. And in these playoff runs, he played great against Arizona State. He played great against Clemson and Ohio State game, not so much, but played well. I feel like that helped him get back into a at least a first, second, or third round pick for somebody. And then another guy, I'm going to use his name again, Cam Scatabo. The way he played against that Texas team, that completely elevated his draft stock. He was going like between the fourth and sixth round, and now he's projected to go in the third round and maybe earlier, second or maybe even first round in some cases. So those are two examples, and I know there's plenty more examples of either hurting or helping their draft stock. Like this is going to help them just like it does with March Madness. The same reason why Steph Curry got drafted from Davidson with the seventh overall pick because the way he played in those college basketball playoffs, like there's so many more examples that we can use. Kemba Walker, another example. Like these playoff runs are going to help these players get drafted earlier and make way more money in the long run.
Yeah, and it could end up hurting some of their stock where if it's like they don't see you showing up in a clutch situation and like you had one of the best teams in the league that year and you're supposed to be a top draft pick, like imagine Trevor in a 12 team playoffs. Does that
Yeah,
expose Trevor Lawrence early on? Yeah, I think
yeah,
so, probably. Like maybe that team was just too dominant because they had so much talent there, but like could I have exposed Trevor Lawrence? Maybe.
yeah. Or
Mac
better yet, even
Jones?
in maybe in these playoffs, like if Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are in these playoffs, does it help or hurt them? Who's going to go number one? Because I think it's a coin toss who Tennessee ultimately goes with. But if either one of them are in the playoffs and they play terribly, you might have played yourself out of the top 10 potentially.
Yeah. What if we saw Josh Rosen in the playoffs? Would he
Maybe
have
they would
gotten
have known that
drafted?
he was completely ass
Sam
ultimately.
Darnold. No, he's
Yeah,
carrying USC. Sure.
sure. Carrying USC, they say. But yeah, college football, I'm interested to see how they change it. They probably need to fix the NIL stuff and they probably need to tweak some things when it comes to the transfer portal. But it's brand new and I'm way more interested in college football than I was before. So win for college football, win for Ohio State. Ohio State played great.
Yeah, congrats. Ohio did something.
Yes. Um, So we talked about college football. We talked about the divisional round. We talked about the latest coaching hires. There's one more thing that we need to do before we conclude our show for tonight. That is right. The documents, take them out of the filing cabinet. We are here to talk about the worst top five in the divisional round of the playoffs. Yes, they are open. It looks empty, but trust me, it's out and about, ready to be unleashed. No
They're in
honorable
Arizona.
mentions this week. Nobody worth mentioning because if you're not on this list, fuck you, to be completely honest. At number five, I have Mark Andrews' hands. Yes, just his hands. The hands that caused a fumble and a pivotal 2 point conversion. I was going to put him at number one, but he dropped it. I was going to put him at number two, but he dropped that too. Number three and four. And again, he dropped those as well. So he just happens to catch himself at number five because he is deserving of this list, potentially hurting Lamar Jackson's legacy in the long term, definitely hurting his legacy in the long run. Will he be a Raven next year, or will the city of Baltimore burn him from the stake? I guess time will tell ultimately. So Mark Andrews at number five. At number four, I have teams that scored more yards than the other team in the divisional round. The Lions, the Ravens, the Texans, and the Rams as well. Everybody outscored them. They had more yards, but yet less points. Make it make sense because in some cases, they didn't even lose the turnover battle. Make it make sense for me. It does not make sense. The most weirdest anomaly that I've seen in the playoffs to this point, the anomaly that is the yards category. At number three, the Lions defense. I hate to do it to them. Their defense got absolutely demolished against the rookie quarterback. I know it is Jaden Daniels. I believe in Jaden Daniels. However, 45 points. This man played nearly a perfect game. Your defense was 16 people on IL with Aiden Hutchinson out and all these other guys. Your defense crumbled the last 2 months. Am I to blame you? Not necessarily. However, when you needed a stop, you didn't get it. Your offense, when they made mistakes, you couldn't capitalize. So therefore, the Lions have to be at number three here. At number two, I know they haven't played in about a month or so at this point now, but I still feel like it is important to bully the New York Giants because Saquon Barkley, the guy that you moved on from, the guy that broke up with you and married the hot supermodel that is the Philadelphia Eagles, he rushes for 200 yards. Ouch. Somebody get this guy some fucking hot and cold because that is tough. He has the third most rushing yards in a single season behind only Terrell Davis, who ran the Broncos to 2 rings in the late 90s. Credit to him. He has the chance to have the most rushing yards in NFL history in a single season. So credit to Saquon and also for the Giants who are sitting at home hoping that Shador Sanders falls into their lap and hoping that Cam Ward falls into the lap, but ultimately might have neither of those things happen for them. They will still be impoverished. They still have to deal with the Commanders and the Eagles. They are in trouble at being the bottom for a long time. But it could be worse for them. They look at their championship rings from 2007 and 2011, respectively, with Eli Manning. They have been in the playoffs more recently, and they've had more success in the last 30 years than the number one team, the Dallas Cowboys. That's right, the Cowboys team that has CeeDee Lamb and has Micah Parsons and has allegedly a top five quarterback with Dak Prescott. You had a coach that people respected. And now you now have the longest conference championship drought in the NFL for teams that have made the conference championship. Teams like the Jaguars, the Jets, the Lions, who have historically sucked, the Giants, who are pathetic, the Browns, at this point. You now are the worst in your division when it comes to playoff success the last 30 years. The Giants have won 2 Super Bowls. The Commanders are in the NFC title game. And the Eagles have a chance to make it to not their first, not their second, third Super Bowl in the last 20 years. So credit to them. You are now the most least successful team in that division. And you could be very bad for a long time, especially if you don't pay the guys that you should. You're supposed to hire Kellen Moore allegedly this week. That's your answer for moving on from Mike McCarthy. Good luck. Jerry Jones and the circus that is the Cowboys continues to go round and round. So therefore, they have to be the worst in this divisional round. Worst top
Yeah,
five.
the worst team in NFL history, eh? In the
Arguably,
2000s. Yeah.
they have the least amount of playoff success for teams that have made the conference championship. They have not made the championship since 1995. You know what I was in 1995? I was a twinkle in my dad's eyes at that time. That is
The
what I was.
Dolphins. Huh. The Dolphins have
Even.
done it and you haven't. And the fact that
Yeah.
like Jalen Hurts has made a Super Bowl and Jaden Daniels has already made a conference championship before Dak. Dak's looking at the other two quarterbacks in his division in the conference championship, and he's never made it before. This is Jalen Hurts'
Mhm.
second time getting there.
Yeah. Exactly. And Janet Daniels is doing this as a rookie, a guy that was coming into an organization that just had a scandal just 2 years ago with their name and their owner and the sexual assault cases. And now they're in the NFC title game and they have a chance to make the Super Bowl against either Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes with a chance to win it. Like, it's got to be tough to be a Cowboys fan right now. Is it tougher than being a Giants fan? We don't know. Probably both suck in some extent, but NFC East down bad, unless if you are the Eagles or Commanders.
Yeah, like is Philadelphia doing this with Dak, and is Washington doing this with Dak?
No,
No,
certainly not with Tommy DeVito either.
no, not with
So,
Tommy DeVito either.
yeah. But nonetheless, I mean, it's great to see these teams continue to suffer, unfortunately. And it's great to see these teams that remain in the playoffs with a quest to destiny in the conference championship where legacies will genuinely be defined. Will Josh Allen finally beat Patrick Mahomes in his fourth chance? And who will win out of the NFC East? Will it be the Eagles, who have been the favorites pretty much all year, or will it be the underdog story with the Commanders and Jaden Daniels? These answers we will predict tomorrow on the show. Don't want to miss it. We will be live, so be here to tune in as we talk about the conference championship.
And most importantly, will you wait for us to come back, talk about the conference championship, break down all good things in sports? Stay brick.
They brick. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, tomorrow.